There's something hauntingly beautiful about the echoes of civilizations' long-gone societies that once pulsed with life, ambition, and culture, only to fade into the shadows of history. Think about it, whole cities, languages, and ways of life vanished as if they were nothing more than whispers on the wind, yet their stories are still there, buried beneath layers of time, waiting to be uncovered. Today, we're stepping off the beaten path of well-known ancient empires like Rome or Egypt and diving deep into the mysteries of 30 lost civilizations you've likely never heard of. These aren't just footnotes in history, they're entire worlds rich with untold tales of triumph, tragedy, and ingenuity. Picture this: sprawling cities hidden beneath dense jungles, advanced technologies lost to the ages, and cultures so unique they defy our modern understanding. From the sun-baked ruins of forgotten desert kingdoms to the enigmatic tribes that thrived in the most inhospitable corners of the earth, these societies were once vibrant, powerful, and utterly significant to the tapestry of human history. But why did they disappear? Was it war, climate change, or something far more mysterious? The answers are as varied as the civilizations themselves, and each one holds a clue to understanding how fragile even the mightiest empires can be. This isn't just a journey through time, it's an adventure into the unknown. We'll unravel the secrets of cultures that built marvels without modern tools, worshipped gods whose names have been erased from memory, and left behind artifacts so puzzling they still baffle archaeologists today. By the end, you'll see history not as a static record but as a living, breathing mystery with chapters still waiting to be written. So, if you're ready to explore the untold stories of humanity's forgotten pioneers, stick around because what we're about to uncover might just change the way you see the past forever. Long before the Inca carved their empire into the Andes, another civilization flourished along the arid coast of Peru, one so ancient it rewrites our understanding of early urban life. The Norte Chico people built their first cities around the same time the pyramids of Egypt were rising, yet their story remains startlingly obscure. What makes them so fascinating is the paradox at their core: a society with no known pottery, no surviving art, and no grand statues to proclaim their greatness, yet they constructed some of the earliest monumental architecture in the Americas. Take Carol, their crowning achievement. This sprawling city, with its sun-baked plazas and towering stone platforms, thrived over 5,000 years ago. Imagine walking its streets when most of the world was still relying on simple villages. The Norte Chico didn't just build, they engineered. Their structures incorporated seismic-resistant designs, a necessity in one of the most earthquake-prone regions on Earth. But how did a culture without written records or even basic ceramics achieve such sophistication? The answer lies in the land itself. While other early civilizations relied on grains like wheat or barley, the Norte Chico harnessed the bounty of the Pacific and the fertile river valleys, cultivating crops like cotton and squash. They didn't need pottery because they wove their storage baskets from the very cotton they grew, a testament to their ingenuity. Trade was their lifeblood. Seashells from the coast found their way high into the Andes, while precious stones traveled in the opposite direction. This network bound distant communities together, creating a web of interdependence that sustained their society for centuries. Yet despite their achievements, the Norte Chico remain in the shadows, overshadowed by the dramatic ruins of later empires. Perhaps it's because they left no golden treasures or epic battles for historians to recount. Their legacy is quieter but no less profound, the blueprint of a civilization that thrived on cooperation, innovation, and a deep understanding of their environment. What finally caused their decline? Climate shifts may have disrupted the delicate balance of their trade routes, or perhaps newer, more aggressive cultures slowly absorbed their ways. Whatever the reason, their disappearance only deepens the mystery. The Norte Chico challenge us to rethink what makes a civilization great, not by the art they left behind, but by the sheer audacity to build something enduring in a landscape that defied permanence. Deep in the heart of what is now Nigeria, a civilization thrived over 2,000 years ago, one whose artifacts still leave archaeologists in awe. The Nok people, emerging around 1500 BC, mastered the art of terracotta with such skill that their sculptures seem to defy time itself. These aren't just primitive clay figures. The lifelike expressions, intricate hairstyles, and detailed jewelry captured in their terracotta portraits suggest a society with a deep appreciation for individuality and artistry unmatched in the region at the time. But the Nok were far more than just artists, they were technological pioneers. While much of sub-Saharan Africa was still in the Stone Age, the Nok were smelting iron, forging tools and weapons that gave them a dramatic advantage in agriculture and warfare. The remnants of their furnaces, some dating back to around 500 BC, stand as some of the earliest evidence of ironworking in West Africa, hinting at a level of sophistication that would influence kingdoms for centuries to come. What's truly remarkable is how they harnessed their environment. The Nok didn't just survive in the dense savannas and forests of central Nigeria, they thrived. Their agricultural innovations allowed them to cultivate yams, sorghum, and oil palms efficiently, creating a stable food surplus that supported a complex society. Archaeologists have discovered widespread evidence of their settlements, suggesting a network of villages connected by trade and shared cultural practices. Yet, despite their advancements, the Nok vanished abruptly around 200 AD, leaving behind little more than their iconic terracotta heads buried in the red earth. The mystery of their disappearance has sparked fierce debate. Some scholars point to climate change, with shifting rainfall patterns disrupting their farming systems. Others suggest overexploitation of resources or even internal conflict, but perhaps the most compelling theory is that the Nok didn't truly vanish, they evolved. Many researchers see echoes of their craftsmanship and metallurgy in later West African civilizations like the Ife and Benin kingdoms, where bronze casting and figurative art reached astonishing heights. Could these later cultures have been the heirs of Nok knowledge, preserving their legacy in new forms? The evidence is tantalizing but fragmentary, much like the terracotta fragments still being unearthed today. What remains undeniable is the Nok's enduring influence. Their artistry and ingenuity challenge the outdated notion that technological and cultural advancements in Africa were solely imported from elsewhere. Instead, the Nok stand as a testament to homegrown innovation, a civilization that reached dazzling heights long before outside forces shaped the continent's future. Their story is a reminder that history is full of silent revolution societies that changed their world in ways we're only beginning to understand. While Mesopotamia often steals the spotlight in ancient history, another civilization thrived just to its east, one with a culture so distinct it defied the dominance of its better-known neighbors. The Elamites, centered in what is now southwestern Iran, built a society that stood toe-to-toe with Sumer and Babylon, yet their story remains criminally overlooked. What set them apart wasn't just their resilience, it was their refusal to conform. Unlike the Mesopotamians, they spoke a language unrelated to any major regional tongue, a linguistic enigma that still puzzles scholars today. Their cuneiform script, adapted from Mesopotamian symbols, carried words that sounded like no other, a defiant echo of their cultural independence. At the heart of Elamite power stood their architectural marvels, ziggurats that rivaled those of Ur or Babylon, but with a twist. Take Chog-Hazanbil, their most sacred site, a massive step temple complex dedicated to their gods, encircled by concentric walls and guarded by glazed brick bulls. This wasn't just a place of worship, it was a statement. While Mesopotamian ziggurats rose from river plains, the Elamites built theirs in arid highlands, hauling materials across treacherous terrain to prove their devotion. Yet their greatest strength lay in their location. Wedged between Mesopotamia and the distant Indus Valley, the Elamites became masterful middlemen, trading lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, tin from Persia, and textiles from the East long before the Silk Road existed. Their political savvy was just as striking. Elam's history is a roller coaster of audacious victories and crushing defeats, one moment sacking Babylon, the next being overrun by Assyrian armies. They played empires like a chessboard, allying with rivals when convenient and rebelling when opportunity struck. But their downfall came from an unexpected direction, the rise of the Persians. Rather than being erased, the Elamites did something remarkable. They blended. When Cyrus the Great founded the Persian Empire, Elamite scribes staffed his bureaucracy. Their language lingered in royal inscriptions, and their art infused Persian motifs. It wasn't conquest but cultural osmosis, a quiet testament to their enduring influence. Why does their legacy matter? Because the Elamites remind us that history isn't just about winners and losers, it's about the societies that shaped the winners. Without Elam's trade networks, Persia's expansion might have faltered. Without their administrative know-how, the empire's famed efficiency could have crumbled. Their story whispers a truth too often ignored. Sometimes the most pivotal civilizations aren't those that dominate the history books, but those that laid the hidden groundwork for the world to come. Far from the well-trodden paths of ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, a different kind of mystery was unfolding along the Danube River over 7,000 years ago. The Vinca culture, thriving in what is now Serbia and parts of Romania and Bulgaria, built settlements so sophisticated they rivaled the earliest cities of the Near East centuries before the pyramids of Giza even broke ground. What makes these people so extraordinary isn't just their age, but the eerie modernity of their achievements. Archaeologists have unearthed their towns, complete with orderly streets, two-story houses, and even specialized workshops, evidence of a society far more complex than the simple farming communities we'd expect from this era. But the real enigma lies in the artifacts they left behind. Take their strange symbols carved into pottery and figurines with deliberate precision. Some scholars argue these markings go beyond decoration. They could be the world's oldest writing system, predating Sumerian cuneiform by over 1,000 years. The symbols repeat in combinations that suggest meaning, almost like an ancient code waiting to be cracked. Yet without a Rosetta Stone to decipher them, we're left guessing. Were these ritual notations trade records or even early attempts at storytelling? What's undeniable is that the Vinca weren't just leaving random scratches. They were communicating something, and that realization shakes our timeline of human innovation to its core. Their technological prowess was equally startling. While most of Europe was still in the Stone Age, the Vinca were smelting copper on an industrial scale. Excavations have revealed furnaces, molds, and vast quantities of intricate metal ornaments, proof they'd mastered metallurgy centuries before their neighbors. This wasn't just small-scale tinkering. They produced enough to trade across the Balkans, creating Europe's first known metalworking network. But with such advancements comes a haunting question. Why did their thriving towns empty out around 4,500 BCE? The clues point to a slow unraveling rather than a single catastrophe. Soil samples reveal worsening floods along the Danube, possibly disrupting agriculture. At the same time, evidence of increased fortifications suggests rising conflict, perhaps as resources grew scarce. Yet there's a twist. The Vinca may not have vanished entirely. Some researchers trace echoes of their symbols and metalworking techniques in later cultures like the Minoans and Mycenaeans, as if fragments of their knowledge drifted southward through trade or migration. This theory, though controversial, hints at a legacy far more enduring than their abandoned cities. The Vinca challenge us to reconsider where and how civilization truly began, proving that brilliance didn't always emerge where history books claim. Their silent symbols and cold furnaces whisper a provocative idea that the ancient world was far more interconnected and far more inventive than we ever imagined. The Minoans of Crete are often celebrated as Europe's first great civilization, but their true origins are shrouded in mystery, and the clues point far beyond the island they called home. While their dazzling palaces and vibrant frescoes feel distinctly Mediterranean, tantalizing evidence suggests their roots might stretch across the sea to North Africa. Take their distinctive art, the sinuous, almost hypnotic depictions of bull-leaping ceremonies and serpent-wielding goddesses bear striking similarities to ancient Libyan and Egyptian motifs. Even their architecture hints at foreign influence. The Minoans built with a lightness and openness unlike the fortress-like structures of mainland Greece, more reminiscent of Nile Delta designs. Could their founders have been seafarers from the south who brought their traditions to Crete? Genetic studies add fuel to this theory, revealing traces of North African ancestry in Minoan remains. It's a provocative idea that Europe's foundational culture may have been, at least in part, a transplant from another continent. What's undeniable is their mastery of the waves. The Minoans weren't just coastal dwellers, they were the Mediterranean's first true thalassocracy, a maritime empire woven together by trade rather than conquest. Their ships, sleek and agile, carried olive oil, saffron, and exquisite pottery from Syria to Sardinia, creating a commercial network so vast it predated the Phoenicians by centuries. At the heart of this web stood Knossos, a labyrinthine palace so advanced it featured flush toilets and intricate ventilation systems, while much of Europe still lived in huts. But their greatest legacy might be their script, Linear A, a writing system that remains one of history's most stubborn puzzles. Unlike later Greek scripts, Linear A's symbols resist decoding, their meanings locked away without a bilingual Rosetta Stone to crack them open. The few surviving tablets hint at temple inventories and trade records, suggesting a society as bureaucratic as it was artistic. Then came the earth-shattering event that changed everything: the eruption of Thera, a volcanic cataclysm so violent it may have inspired Plato's tale of Atlantis. Around 1600 BCE, the island now called Santorini exploded with a force estimated to be 4 times that of Krakatoa. Tsunamis devastated Crete's northern coasts, ash blotted out the sun for years, and the Minoans' carefully maintained trade routes collapsed almost overnight. Yet what's fascinating is how they clung to life. Their culture didn't vanish immediately but limped on for generations, even as Mycenaean Greeks from the mainland began absorbing their remnants. You can still see this cultural handoff in later Greek myths. The story of Theseus navigating the labyrinth to slay the Minotaur reads like a metaphor for the Mycenaeans navigating and ultimately claiming the crumbling maze of Minoan power. Their influence echoes far beyond myth. The Minoans gave the Greeks more than just legends. They passed down architectural techniques, artistic styles, and perhaps even the concept of centralized governance. Those vibrant frescoes of dolphins and octopuses, their fluid, naturalistic style would resurface centuries later in classical Greek art, the reverence for goddesses and sacred bulls. It found new life in the cults of Demeter and Dionysus. Even their maritime prowess set a precedent for the seafaring Greeks who followed. The Minoans remind us that civilizations don't truly die, they transform, their brightest sparks carried forward in the cultures they touched. Their story isn't just about collapse, it's about rebirth, a testament to how even the mightiest disasters can't erase a people's imprint on history. Amid the shimmering waters of the Persian Gulf, where modern skyscrapers now dominate the skyline, lies the forgotten legacy of a civilization that once held the keys to the ancient world's wealth. The kingdom of Dilmun wasn't just a dot on the map. It was the beating heart of Bronze Age commerce, a place so prosperous that the Sumerians wrote about it in myths as a paradise untouched by sickness or death. Imagine a bustling port where ships from Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, and distant Oman converged, their hulls laden with copper, ivory, and lapis lazuli. Dilmun's merchants didn't just trade goods, they traded ideas, technologies, and even legends, weaving together cultures separated by thousands of miles. What made this island civilization extraordinary wasn't just its strategic location, it was the almost mythical fertility of its land. Ancient texts describe Dilmun as a place of bright and sacred springs where date palms swayed over crystal-clear waters. Some scholars believe these lush gardens, described in Sumerian poetry as a realm where the lion does not kill, the wolf does not snatch the lamb, may have planted the seed for the Garden of Eden story. Archaeologists digging in modern Bahrain, the likely core of Dilmun, have uncovered vast underground aquifers that once fed these oases, turning barren islands into agricultural wonders. The remnants of their intricate irrigation systems reveal a mastery of hydraulics rivaling Egypt's, but Dilmun's true power lay in its monopoly over one of antiquity's most coveted resources, copper. Acting as middlemen between the mines of Oman and the insatiable markets of Mesopotamia, they transformed raw metal into wealth, smelting and refining it before shipping it north. Their seal impressions, found as far away as Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley, tell the story of a standardized trade system, an ancient version of corporate branding. Yet around 1800 BC, the tide began to turn. Shifting trade routes, possibly due to political upheaval in Mesopotamia or the rise of competing ports, slowly starved Dilmun of its lifeblood. The gardens dried up, the ships stopped coming, and the once vibrant cities faded into abandoned ruins. What lingers isn't just the mystery of their decline, it's the realization that Dilmun was more than a kingdom. It was a bridge between worlds, a place where the first threads of globalization were spun long before the term existed. Its echoes persist in the customs of modern Gulf communities, in the way they trade, build, and even worship. The next time you hear the story of Eden, remember, some myths might just be faded memories of a real place where the water was sweet, the trees heavy with fruit, and the docks buzzed with the voices of 1,000 languages. High in the rugged mountains of southern Mexico, far from the jungles of the Maya, the Zapotec people carved their own destiny into the very bedrock of history. While their better-known neighbors dominated the lowlands, the Zapotec built Monte Albon, a city so audacious it transformed a barren mountaintop into the pulsating heart of a civilization that thrived for over 1,000 years. Imagine standing in their grand plaza, surrounded by towering pyramids and astronomical observatories, while below you stretched the entire Oaxaca Valley like a living map. This wasn't just a city, it was a statement, proof that human ingenuity could conquer even the most unforgiving terrain. What set the Zapotec apart wasn't just their architectural daring, it was their intellectual fire. They developed one of America's earliest writing systems, scratching intricate glyphs into stone and pottery centuries before the Maya script reached its peak. These symbols weren't mere decoration, they recorded conquests, rituals, and even the names of rulers, offering glimpses into a society as obsessed with legacy as any European monarchy. Their calendar system was equally sophisticated, tracking celestial events with precision that rivaled their Mesoamerican contemporaries. But perhaps most astonishing is their danzantes, a collection of stone carvings depicting contorted figures that some scholars interpret as sacrificial victims or prisoners of war. These eerie sculptures hint at a darker side to their achievements, a reminder that even the most advanced cultures were shaped by the brutal realities of their time. The Zapotec's decline is a puzzle wrapped in layers of mystery. By the time Spanish conquistadors arrived, Monte Albon had already been abandoned for centuries, its grandeur reclaimed by the earth. Some theories point to climate shift droughts that strained their ingenious terraced farming systems. Others suggest internal strife or pressure from emerging rivals like the Mixtecs, who eventually occupied their sacred spaces. Yet there's a twist: the Zapotec never truly vanished. Their descendants still live in Oaxaca today, speaking variants of a language that once echoed through Monte Albon's plazas. Modern artisans craft black pottery using techniques passed down through generations, a silent tribute to ancestors who turned clay into art a millennium ago. Their legacy challenges our obsession with dramatic collapses. The Zapotec didn't just disappear, they adapted, their culture flowing like water into new forms. When you look at the vibrant textiles and bustling markets of contemporary Oaxaca, you're seeing the unbroken thread of a civilization that refused to be erased. Monte Albán's silent stones may no longer host ceremonies, but the spirit of the people who built them endures proof that some civilizations outlast their cities, living on in the hands, tongues, and memories of those who carry them forward. The Harappans didn't just build cities, they engineered societies with a precision that would make modern urban planners envious. While Egypt and Mesopotamia were erecting pyramids and ziggurats, the Indus Valley civilization was perfecting something far more revolutionary: functional equality. Walk through the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro or Harappa, and you won't find grand palaces or temples towering over slums. Instead, you'll see grid-patterned streets, uniform brick sizes, and a staggering attention to public welfare that hints at a society where the concept of common good wasn't just an idea, it was infrastructure. Their underground sewer systems, with carefully laid drains in every neighborhood, weren't luxury amenities for the elite. They were universal, servicing even modest homes centuries before Rome's famed aqueducts. What's even more remarkable is their economic system. Archaeologists have unearthed thousands of small stone cubes, standardized weights so consistent across the civilization's vast territory that they vary by less than 1%. This wasn't just convenient, it was radical. Imagine traders from distant cities conducting business without haggling over measures, trusting a system so precise it functioned like an ancient metric system. Some scholars speculate this uniformity points to something even more extraordinary, a form of collective governance. Unlike the god-kings of Egypt or the warlords of Mesopotamia, Harappan art shows no obvious depictions of monarchs. Their seals feature animals and mythical creatures, not triumphant rulers. Could they have practiced an early form of democracy or council-based leadership? The evidence is tantalizing but incomplete, like so much of their story. Then there's the puzzle of their script, a delicate, cursive-like writing etched onto seals and pottery that remains one of linguistics' greatest unsolved mysteries. With over 400 distinct symbols, it's too complex to be a simple alphabet but too brief on surviving artifacts to decode statistically. The average inscription contains just 5 characters, some scratched onto tiny amulets no larger than a thumbnail. Without a Rosetta Stone equivalent, these markings guard their secrets fiercely. Are they trade receipts, religious invocations, poetry? The frustration is palpable among researchers. Here lies one of the world's first writing systems, silent as the civilization that created it. Their disappearance is equally enigmatic. Around 1900 BC, the great cities began emptying, but unlike civilizations felled by invasion, there's no evidence of violent conquest. Instead, the clues point to a slow unraveling, shifting river patterns that disrupted agriculture, prolonged droughts hinted at in geological layers, and eventually a quiet migration eastward. Recent research suggests many Harappans didn't vanish but became cultural ancestors to villages in the Ganges region, their urban brilliance giving way to rural resilience. The lesson here isn't one of collapse but transformation, a reminder that civilizations don't always die. Sometimes they dissolve into the land itself, leaving behind whispers in the pottery shards, the waitstones, and the stubbornly silent seals that refuse to give up their stories. Before the Hittites carved their empire into the hills of Anatolia, another civilization whispered its secrets through the valleys, a people so ancient their name echoes like a half-remembered dream. The Hattians built their world in what is now Turkey over 4,000 years ago, leaving behind traces of a culture both foreign and familiar. Unlike the Indo-European Hittites who would later dominate the region, the Hattians spoke a language that stood utterly alone, unrelated to any known linguistic family, a linguistic island in human history. Their words survive only in fragments preserved by their conquerors like pressed flowers in the pages of a foreign book. Yet these fragments reveal something extraordinary, a sacred tongue used in rituals long after the Hattians themselves had faded, as if their power lingered in the very syllables they'd crafted. Their religious practices were equally distinctive. The Hattians worshipped a storm god who would later be adopted and adapted by the Hittites under the name Tarhan. But their pantheon was far richer, a web of earth goddesses, mountain deities, and celestial beings who demanded not just sacrifice but ecstatic celebration. Ancient texts describe rituals where priests donned animal masks, dancing to the rhythm of bronze drums while the scent of burnt honey and juniper filled the air. Some scholars see in these ceremonies the distant roots of later Anatolian myths, even echoes of the Greek Dionysian mysteries. The Hattians didn't just pray to their gods, they became them, if only for a night, in performances that blurred the line between mortal and divine. When the Hittites arrived, they didn't erase the Hattians, they enveloped them. This wasn't destruction but transformation, as layer upon layer of Hattian tradition seeped into the conqueror's culture like water into stone. Hittite kings took Hattian names for their coronations, invoking the old magic to legitimize their rule. Temples once dedicated to Hattian deities simply acquired new legends like pages rewritten over an ancient manuscript. Even the legendary kingship in heaven myth, later recorded by the Hittites and thought to influence Greek tales of Uranus and Cronus, may have sprung from Hattian storytellers. The irony is breathtaking. The very people who vanished from history as a distinct civilization live on in the stories of those who replaced them. Modern excavations at Alakahayuk, once a Hattian stronghold, reveal graves filled with solar discs and stag statues, emblems of a cosmology that would later appear in Hittite art. These artifacts whisper a truth we're only beginning to grasp, that conquest isn't always annihilation. Sometimes it's rebirth in disguise as the conquered reshape their conquerors from within. The Hattians remind us that civilizations don't need monuments to endure sometimes. All they need is a story potent enough to outlast empires. In the heart of China's Sichuan Basin, a civilization thrived in near-total obscurity, until a farmer's shovel struck bronze in 1986, revealing artifacts so alien they seemed to rewrite history. The Sangsingdui people crafted masks with exaggerated, almost otherworldly features, elongated faces with protruding eyes the size of fists, ears that stretched like wings, and expressions frozen between divinity and delirium. These weren't portraits of rulers but possibly deities or spirits, forged in bronze with a sophistication that rivaled, and in some ways surpassed, their Shang dynasty contemporaries. Yet what makes them truly extraordinary is what's missing. No written records, no grand tombs, no clear connection to the lineages that would later dominate Chinese history. The scale of their metallurgy defies explanation. Imagine furnaces capable of casting statues over 12 feet tall, technological feats requiring not just skill but an entire system of organized labor and resources. Their bronze blends contained precise ratios of lead, tin, and copper, suggesting knowledge passed down through generations of master craftsmen. But here's the mystery. While the Shang dynasty bronzes emphasized ritual vessels for ancestor worship, Sangsingdui artifacts feel untethered from that tradition. Their towering bronze trees, studded with birds and strange fruits, resemble the mythical Fusang tree from Chinese legend, a bridge between heaven and earth. Were these objects part of shamanistic rituals, offerings to gods lost to time? The silence of their unmarked ruins offers no easy answers. Then, around 1200 BC, their civilization vanished. The most compelling theory points to an earthquake so violent it diverted the nearby Min River, leaving their settlements without water, an ecological catastrophe preserved in layers of silt. But there's another tantalizing possibility: assimilation. Some scholars spot echoes of Sangsingdui's angular art style in later Shu kingdom relics, hinting at cultural survival through subtle reinvention. Even more provocative are the linguistic clues, a handful of obscure characters in early Chinese scripts that might encode fragments of their lost language. What lingers isn't just the enigma of their disappearance, but the unsettling realization that Sangsingdui represents a parallel path in China's cultural evolution. Their bronzes challenge the narrative of a single, unbroken lineage from the Shang to modern China, proving that the ancient world was far more diverse and far stranger than history books dare to admit. Those haunting masks aren't just artifacts, they're mirrors reflecting the countless untold stories still buried beneath our feet. Beneath the scorching sands of Central Asia, along the Amu Darya River, once known as the Oxus, a civilization thrived with such opulence that its goldwork still leaves archaeologists speechless. The Oxus people, flourishing between 2200 and 1800 BC, didn't just trade in luxury, they lived it. Excavations at sites like Gonner de Pe have unearthed treasures that rival Tutankhamun's tomb. Delicate gold chariot models, intricately carved stone seals, and jewelry so fine it could pass for modern craftsmanship. But these weren't just pretty trinkets, they were the heartbeat of an economic powerhouse. The Oxus civilization sat at the crossroads of the ancient world, where Mesopotamian merchants, Harappan traders, and Siberian nomads converged. Their cities buzzed with the clatter of workshops producing bronze tools, the barter of lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, and the weigh-ins of silver ingots standardized down to the gram. What's truly astonishing is how they mastered their harsh environment. In the middle of the Karakum Desert, they engineered sprawling oasis cities with sophisticated irrigation canals that turned barren earth into fertile fields. Their architects designed fortified palaces with labyrinthine corridors, while their artisans perfected the lost wax casting technique to create bronze sculptures unmatched in the region. Yet for all their wealth, the Oxus people left no grandiose monuments to their kings, no towering statues or boastful inscriptions. Instead, their legacy lives in the everyday, clay tablets recording trades, homes with carefully arranged hearths, and graves where even ordinary citizens were buried with small tokens of respect. This was a society where prosperity seemed widely shared, not hoarded by an elite few. Then, around 1800 BC, the water stopped flowing. Core samples from the region's ancient riverbeds tell a grim story, shifting climate patterns that turned the Amu Darya into a trickle, then a memory. Without the river's lifeblood, the canals dried up, the crops withered, and the bustling markets fell silent. But here's the twist: the Oxus people didn't just vanish. Some migrated north, their cultural fingerprints appearing in later steppe societies like the Bactria-Margiana complex. Others may have adapted, becoming the wandering traders who later connected the Silk Road. Their goldwork resurfaced centuries later in Persian and Scythian hoards, as if their artistry was too precious to discard. The lesson of the Oxus isn't just about collapse, it's about resilience in the face of inevitability. They remind us that even the wealthiest civilizations are at the mercy of their environment, and that true legacy isn't measured in gold, but in how far your influence travels when the rivers run dry. Those stunning artifacts now locked in museum cases, they're not just relics, they're messages in a bottle from a people who refused to let the desert erase them completely. The scorching deserts of China's Tarim Basin guard one of history's most startling secrets: perfectly preserved mummies with European features, buried thousands of miles from where they belonged. These aren't just faded remnants, their flaxen hair, high cheekbones, and woven woolen garments look like they wandered straight out of Bronze Age Scandinavia. Dating back as early as 1800 BC, these Caucasian-like figures append everything we thought we knew about ancient East-West contact. How did they end up here in what's now Xinjiang, surrounded by the ancestors of modern East Asian peoples? The answer lies in the whispers of their language, the weave of their textiles, and the silent testimony of their graves. The most compelling clue comes from later written records, inscriptions in a tongue called Tocharian, a language so shockingly out of place it's like finding a Norse saga scribbled in a Chinese scroll. Tocharian, spoken in the Tarim Basin over 1,000 years after these mummies lived, belongs to the Indo-European family, sharing roots with Celtic, Greek, and Sanskrit. This linguistic bombshell suggests these travelers or their descendants weren't just passing through, they built a lasting cultural bridge between worlds. Their very existence rewrites the timeline of trans-Eurasian exchange, proving that long before Marco Polo or the Silk Road, people were crossing continents, trading not just goods but genes and ideas. What's even more fascinating is how they lived. Unlike the nomadic tribes often depicted in ancient Chinese texts, the Tarim people seem to have been settled agriculturalists. Their graves hold finely crafted baskets, cheeses made from kefir, and even remnants of ephedra, a plant used in rituals and medicine. Their clothing, woven with intricate patterns and vibrant dyes, mirrors techniques found in ancient Europe and the Near East. Yet they weren't mere transplants. They adapted brilliantly to their harsh environment, using felted wool for insulation and constructing poplar wood coffins shaped like boats, as if symbolizing a journey, either to the afterlife or perhaps echoing distant memories of ancestral homelands. The debate over their origins is as fierce as the desert winds. Some scholars argue they were remnants of the Afanasevo culture, Bronze Age herders from Siberia who migrated south. Others see connections to the mysterious Yamnaya people of the Eurasian steppe, whose migrations reshaped Europe and Asia. But here's the twist. DNA analyzers reveal these mummies weren't newcomers to the region at all. Some lineages had been there for millennia, suggesting deep roots in Central Asia. This complicates the narrative, hinting at a far older web of Eurasian interactions than previously imagined. Their disappearance is another enigma. By the time the Han dynasty began documenting the western regions around 200 BC, the Tocharians were there, but their distinct culture was already blending with others, absorbed into the swirling diversity of the Silk Road. Yet traces lingered. Buddhist texts from the first millennium CE, written in Tocharian, prove their language survived for centuries as a liturgical tongue, a ghostly echo of a forgotten people. Today, their mummified faces challenge nationalist histories that insist on rigid ethnic boundaries in antiquity. They force us to confront a messier, richer past, one where cultures mixed freely, where East and West were fluid concepts, and where a single body in the sand could rewrite the story of humanity. While the Norte Chico's inland achievements are staggering, their story takes a fascinating turn when we look toward the Pacific. The same people who engineered earthquake-resistant pyramids in the desert may have also been master navigators, tapping into the ocean's bounty in ways we're only beginning to understand. Along Peru's coast, archaeologists have uncovered vast middens, ancient garbage piles filled with fish bones and seashells stretching back millennia. But these aren't just random leftovers, they're organized by species, suggesting systematic fishing practices on an almost industrial scale. What's astonishing is the variety: anchovies, sardines, even deep water sharks, hinting at fleets of reed boats venturing far beyond the shoreline. The real smoking gun lies in the trade networks. Excavations at Norte Chico sites have yielded shells from Ecuador's warm waters and exotic bird feathers from the Amazon, proving their reach extended hundreds of miles in every direction. But the most compelling evidence comes from their very DNA. Studies of Norte Chico remains show elevated levels of marine isotopes, meaning these people weren't just eating fish, they were living on it. Some skeletons reveal ear bones deformed by frequent diving, likely free divers harvesting shellfish in the cold Humboldt Current. This wasn't just subsistence, it was a maritime economy sophisticated enough to support urban growth without staple crops like maize. Theories about their seafaring prowess grow even bolder when we examine their coastal outposts. At sites like Aspero and Banduria, platforms and plazas mirror the inland cities, but with one crucial difference: enormous net sinkers and fish processing areas. Some researchers believe these were seasonal hubs, where inland farmers migrated during arid periods to exploit the ocean's endless buffet. others argue for permanent maritime specialists, a caste of fishermen traders who kept the civilization's lifelines intact. Either way, the ocean wasn't just a pantry, it was a highway. Then there's the mystery of the knotted strings found in later Andean cultures. While no Norte Chico quippers survive, the sheer abundance of cotton, a crop useless for food but perfect for making fishing nets and sailcloth, hints at an early version of these recording devices. Could they have been tracking fish hauls or trade debts? Without surviving examples, we're left with provocative clues scattered like shells along the shore. The Norte Chico's relationship with the sea forces us to rethink where civilization begins. While others were taming wheat and barley, these people were building cities powered by anchovies and seaweed, proving that progress doesn't always follow the script we expect. Their silent boats may have vanished from history's waves, but the ripples they left in trade routes, technologies, and sheer adaptability still lap at the edges of our understanding. Those haunting terracotta faces from the Nok civilization aren't just artifacts, they're a revolution frozen in clay. Each sculpture, with its coiled hairstyles and piercing eyes, captures a moment of artistic daring that rippled across Africa for centuries. Look closely and you'll see the birth of a visual language. The triangular eyes and parted lips of Nok figures resurface in the bronze masterpieces of the Ife Kingdom 1,000 years later. Even the Yoruba's famed naturalistic portraits, crafted with such precision that early European excavators accused them of being Greek imports, owe a debt to these ancient prototypes. The Nok didn't just make art, they invented a tradition, one that would shape the continent's aesthetic DNA long after their civilization faded. Yet these fragile remnants nearly vanished twice, first to time, then to greed. Modern excavations reveal a grim reality. Countless Nok sites have been stripped bare by looters feeding the global black market. A single terracotta head can fetch six-figure sums in European auction houses, leaving gaping holes in the archaeological record. The tragedy isn't just the loss of objects, it's the erasure of context. Without knowing which sculptures were found near iron smelting furnaces or agricultural tools, we lose clues about their role in Nok society. Were they ancestor portraits, deities, political propaganda? Each looted piece takes another chapter of their story with it. Efforts to reclaim this legacy are as inventive as the Nok themselves. Nigerian archaeologists now partner with local communities, training villagers to spot and report illicit digs. Meanwhile, museums employ forensic clay analysis to trace stolen artifacts back to their original sites, like art detectives piecing together a shattered puzzle. Some of the most exciting breakthroughs come from 3D imaging, allowing researchers to digitally reconstruct damaged sculptures and study their crafting techniques down to the fingerprint marks left by Nok artists. What emerges is a portrait of a civilization that balanced technical precision with raw emotional power. Their terracottas weren't mass-produced, each bears subtle quirks, from the varying depths of carved pupils to the unique textures of clay mixed with grog for durability. This individuality suggests the Nok valued artistic expression as much as ritual function, a radical concept for their era. Their legacy endures not just in museums, but in the work of contemporary African artists who draw inspiration from those ancient coils and curves, proving that the most powerful art never truly dies, it just waits to be rediscovered. The Elamites didn't just worship their gods, they wove them into the very fabric of their identity, creating a spiritual tapestry as intricate as their famed ziggurats. At the center stood Kirarisha, the great goddess, a deity so powerful her influence stretched from the heavens to the underworld. Unlike the distant, often capricious gods of Mesopotamia, Kirarisha embodied a startling duality. She was both nurturer and destroyer, her favor sought for bountiful harvests and her wrath feared in times of war. Artifacts depict her crowned with lunar crescents, her arms outstretched like the branches of the sacred date palms that shaded Elam's temples. What makes her truly remarkable is how she evolved. When the Persians later absorbed Elam's territories, Kirarisha didn't vanish, she merged with Anahita, the Zoroastrian water goddess, her symbols of fertility and sovereignty living on in new rituals. But the Elamite pantheon was far from a one-goddess show. Their religion pulsed with a vibrant cast of deities, each tied to natural forces and human endeavors. Inshushinak, the patron god of Susa, ruled as judge of the dead, his temples doubling as courts where oaths were sworn on his name. Lesser-known spirits like the snake god Shimut wielded their own niches, guarding travelers and smiths alike. The Elamites didn't just pray passively, their rituals were immersive spectacles. Cuneiform tablets describe ceremonies where priests, clad in robes dyed with precious lapis lazuli, enacted sacred dramas. At the climax, they'd shatter clay tablets inscribed with curses against enemies, the fragments buried beneath temple foundations as metaphysical landmines against evil. Perhaps most striking was their approach to the afterlife. While Egyptians built tombs for eternal leisure and Mesopotamians feared a gloomy underworld, Elamites prepared for a celestial bureaucracy. Grave goods included clay, passports for the soul tablets listing the deceased's virtues to present at Inshushinak's divine tribunal. This wasn't just superstition. It reflected their society's obsession with order, mirroring the meticulous trade records found in their warehouses. Even their temples were designed as cosmic ledgers, with altars positioned to track solstices, tying earthly rituals to celestial rhythms. The echoes of these practices linger in unexpected places. Modern Noah's celebrations in Iran, the spring equinox festival, still feature half-sin tables adorned with sprouting greens, a tradition some scholars trace back to Elamite harvest rites. The Persians may have conquered Elam politically, but spiritually the conquered left an indelible mark. When Cyrus the Great styled himself as a benevolent ruler, he borrowed the Elamite model of sacral kingship, where rulers were both warriors and high priests. Even the famed Persian reverence for fire likely absorbed Elamite influences. Their altars at Chog, Hazanbil, show the earliest known use of eternal flames in the region. This cultural osmosis reveals a truth we often miss. Religions don't replace one another so much as they blend, like rivers merging downstream. The Elamites' greatest triumph wasn't surviving as a distinct civilization, but dissolving into the spiritual DNA of the empires that followed. Their gods may have shed their old names, but their essence, the demand for balance between human and divine, the interplay of destruction and renewal, lives on wherever Nora's candles are lit or Anahita's springs are revered. In the quiet persistence of ritual, the past never truly dies. Those mysterious Vinca symbols carved into ancient pottery shards ignite one of archaeology's fiercest debates. Did Europe's forgotten civilization invent writing millennia before anyone else, or are we seeing something far more ambiguous? The controversy cuts to the heart of what we consider true writing versus proto-writing, marks that convey meaning but lack the systematic complexity of full language. On one side are scholars pointing to the symbol's striking recurrence across hundreds of artifacts. Certain combinations, like an encircled cross paired with zigzag lines, appear repeatedly at sites spanning centuries, suggesting standardized communication rather than random decoration. The discovery in 2019 of a Vinca-style tablet near the Danube, bearing 22 distinct symbols arranged in deliberate rows, sent shockwaves through the academic world. If these were mere ritual marks, why arrange them so methodically? Opponents counter with a crucial absence. No Vinca artifact has ever been found with enough sequential symbols to demonstrate syntactic rules, the grammatical glue that turns pictographs into language. Proto-writing systems like Mesopotamian token envelopes or Inca quipus conveyed information visually, but true writing requires symbols to represent specific sounds or words in reproducible combinations. Here, the Vinca record falls frustratingly silent, but new technologies are reshaping the debate. Computational analyzers using pattern recognition software have identified statistically significant symbol groupings clusters that may represent early attempts at phonetic representation. Even more tantalizing are the spatial distribution maps revealing how certain symbols appear predominantly near trade goods, hinting at possible mercantile notation. The most compelling evidence may come from outside the Vinca heartland. A handful of matching symbols have surfaced in distant Neolithic sites from Greece to Ukraine, suggesting these marks traveled along trade routes with shared meaning. Imagine Bronze Age merchants recognizing a Vinca ox symbol scratched on a shipment of grain, understanding its significance without sharing a spoken language. That level of cross-cultural recognition edges dangerously close to true writing's functional purpose. Perhaps we're asking the wrong question. Instead of forcing Vinca symbols into rigid categories, they might represent a third path, a system evolving toward writing but frozen in time by the civilization's decline. Like a biological missing link, they challenge our neat classifications, reminding us that human communication has always been messier and more inventive than textbooks allow. Those enigmatic scratches on clay aren't just artifacts. They're a puzzle box holding secrets about how and why humans first tried to make their thoughts permanent. The Minoan civilization turned gender norms upside down in ways that would shock their Bronze Age neighbors. While women in Mesopotamia and Egypt were largely confined to domestic roles, Minoan frescoes and artifacts depict women at the heart of public life, leading religious ceremonies, participating in athletic events, and even presiding over trade negotiations. At Knossos, the famous procession fresco shows women walking side by side with men, their elaborate tiered skirts and exposed breasts signaling not vulnerability but sacred authority. These weren't background figures, they grasped ritual vessels and snakes with the confidence of those accustomed to power. The most striking evidence comes from their religious practices. Unlike the male-dominated pantheons of Greece and the Near East, Minoan shrines overwhelmingly feature goddess figurines, bare-breasted women clutching serpents or raising their arms in benediction. Some scholars argue this points to a matrifocal society where lineage traced through mothers and priestesses held sway over spiritual matters. Nowhere is this female prominence clearer than in the bull-leaping frescoes. While later Greek myths recast these death-defying acrobatics as male exploits, Minoan art consistently shows women as active participants grasping the bull's horns mid-flip, their hair flying with the same kinetic energy as their male counterparts. This wasn't just art, it was social reality. Archaeological finds confirm women worked as master artisans too, particularly in intricate crafts like sealstone engraving and goldsmithing. The famous bee pendant from Malia, with its filigree wings thinner than a fingernail, likely came from a woman's workshop, a level of technical skill that commanded respect in a trade-dominated economy. What made this possible? The answer may lie in the Minoans' unique economic structure. With maritime trade fueling their prosperity, physical strength mattered less than social networks and specialized knowledge areas where women could excel equally. Linear tablets list female names overseeing textile production, a major export commodity, suggesting they controlled lucrative industries. Even their clothing signaled status. Unlike the restrictive garments of contemporaneous societies, Minoan women wore fitted bodices that allowed movement, their skirts slit for dancing or sport. This practical elegance reflected a culture that valued female agency rather than suppressing it. The contrast with neighboring civilizations couldn't be starker. While an Egyptian woman needed her husband's permission to buy goods, Minoan women appear in legal scenes sealing contracts independently. In Anatolia, priestesses served male gods. In Crete, they channeled goddesses who demanded direct communion. This gender parity wasn't perfect. Men still dominated political leadership, but the overall picture reveals a society where women's contributions were visibly celebrated rather than erased. The lingering mystery is why this equilibrium collapsed. As Mycenaean influence grew, female figures in art shrank literally. Later frescoes depict women smaller in scale than men, a visual demotion signaling shifting power dynamics. Yet, even in decline, echoes persisted. The Greek goddesses Athena and Hera inherited traits from their Minoan predecessors, and the oracle at Delphi may have owed its original female leadership to Crete's spiritual legacy. The Minoans proved that equality wasn't some modern invention. It was a road not taken, a glimpse of what might have been had history unfolded differently. Their art whispers across millennia, civilization once looked like this too. The Sumerian myth of Dilmun paints a picture so idyllic it seems lifted from a dream, a land where the lion does not kill, the wolf does not snatch the lamb, and no one grows old. To the poets of Mesopotamia, this was more than folklore. It was a spiritual homeland, a place where the sun god Utu rested and where the goddess of healing Ninhursag bestowed immortality. But when archaeologists began peeling back the layers of Bahrain's soil, they uncovered a reality far more complex than paradise. The Dilmun of myth was a timeless sanctuary, but the Dilmun of history was a bustling, pragmatic society where merchants haggled over copper ingots and farmers battled salty soil to coax barley from the earth. The contrast between legend and fact can be jarring. Excavations at sites like Kalat al-Bahrain reveal not just temples but sprawling warehouses stacked with Mesopotamian pottery and Indus Valley seals. The sacred springs of myth, they were real, but also engineered, channeled through intricate stone conduits to serve both ritual and irrigation. Even the famed paradise gardens required backbreaking labor. Soil analysis shows farmers had to constantly flush fields with fresh water to combat salinity, a battle against nature that myth conveniently omitted. Yet the overlap between legend and reality holds tantalizing clues. Those mythical traders who brought gold from faraway lands, their real-world counterparts left invoices, clay tablets detailing shipments of copper from Oman and lapis lazuli from Afghanistan. The eternal aspect of Dilmun's fame might stem from its role as a neutral trading hub, a place where warring empires like Babylon and Elam could do business without bloodshed. Even the lion and lamb imagery could encode a deeper truth. Isotopic studies of animal bones show Dilmun's livestock enjoyed grain-rich diets, suggesting a level of agricultural surplus rare in the Bronze Age. The greatest revelation, however, lies in the graves. While myth spoke of a land without death, Dilmun's inhabitants built vast necropolises, over 170,000 burial mounds dotting Bahrain's landscape. But here's the twist: these weren't tombs of sorrow. The dead were buried with cosmetics, game boards, and even food, as if death in Dilmun was merely a continuation of the good life. Perhaps this is where myth and reality truly merge, not in the absence of struggle, but in the conviction that a well-lived life, whether as a trader or a farmer, could earn a taste of eternity. The lesson of Dilmun isn't that myths lie, but that they refract truth through the lens of human longing. The real Dilmun was no paradise, yet its ability to convince generations it was one may be its most enduring achievement. Every ship that unloaded copper there, every prayer whispered at its springs, added another thread to the legend. By the time the last traders packed their wares, the line between the Dilmun of earth and the Dilmun of dreams had blurred beyond recognition, proof that sometimes a civilization's greatest export isn't goods but hope itself. The thump of a rubber ball against stone courts echoed through Monte Alban centuries before the Maya played their famed game of Pak. But for the Zapotec, this was far more than sport. Their ball game, known as Alamalistli in Nahuatl, was a sacred drama where players became cosmic actors, their movements mirroring the celestial battles between light and darkness. The courts themselves were more than playing fields. They were portals to the underworld, built with sloping walls that amplified the ball's thunderous bounce, turning each match into a ritual performance. Unlike the later Maya version with its stone rings, early Zapotec courts lacked these iconic hoops, suggesting the game's original purpose was less about scoring and more about the symbolic journey of the ball itself, a stand-in for the sun's perilous passage through the underworld each night. Archaeologists have uncovered gruesome clues to the game's spiritual weight. Carvings at the ancient site of Dainzu show players clad in heavy protective gear, yokes around their waists, padded knee guards locked in poses that blur the line between athlete and sacrificial offering. Some figures clutch obsidian knives, hinting at a deadly conclusion for the defeated. Yet there's a twist. Other depictions show victorious players being showered with flowers, suggesting the outcome wasn't simply life or death, but a complex exchange of cosmic energy. The ball, made from sacred rubber tapped from local trees, was believed to contain the essence of the rain god Kasijo, its rebound symbolizing lightning, its circular shape echoing the cyclical nature of time. What makes the Zapotec version uniquely haunting is its connection to their calendar system. Glyphs at Monte Albon reveal that major games coincided with celestial events like Venus's appearances, turning matches into living horoscopes where the players' fates reflected broader cosmic alignments. The ball court's orientation wasn't random either. Many align precisely with solstice sunrises, flooding the playing surface with dawn light during pivotal rituals. This meticulous choreography of stone and sky suggests the game was a form of divination, with every bounce and ricochet interpreted by priests for omens. The most provocative discovery came in the 1990s when researchers noticed peculiar acoustics in Zapotec ball courts. A whisper at one end could be heard clearly over 100 feet away, an intentional design feature that may have transformed games into immersive sonic experiences. Chants, drumbeats, and the ball's echoes would have merged into a hypnotic rhythm, heightening the ritual's intensity. Modern recreations using rubber balls based on archaeological finds confirm the sound is unnervingly loud, like thunder rolling across the mountains, a sensory detail lost in silent stone carvings but vital to understanding how the game could entrance entire communities. While later Mesoamerican cultures would turn the ball game into spectacle, the Zapotec roots reveal something purer, a direct dialogue with the divine. Their players weren't just athletes, they were intermediaries, their sweat and blood sustaining the fragile balance between earth and sky. When Spanish chroniclers later dismissed the game as pagan frivolity, they missed its profound truth. For the Zapotec, Ullamalistli wasn't entertainment. It was the heartbeat of the universe, played out in latex and stone. The Harappans didn't just build cities, they engineered water with a precision that would leave modern hydrologists speechless. In a land where monsoons were fickle and rivers could vanish overnight, they turned survival into an art form. Walk through the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro and you'll stumble upon something extraordinary. Over 700 wells, each lined with precisely fitted bricks to prevent collapse. These weren't just holes in the ground, they were part of an intricate grid, strategically placed so no home was more than 50 meters from fresh water. But the real marvel lies beneath the streets, a network of covered drains, some wide enough to walk through, channeled wastewater away from residential areas with gradients so exact they required advanced mathematics to design. This wasn't mere infrastructure, it was a philosophy, an understanding that cleanliness and water access weren't luxuries, but the foundation of civilization itself. Their innovations didn't stop at pipes. At Dolavira, a Harappan city perched on the edge of the Thar Desert, archaeologists uncovered a series of massive reservoirs carved into the bedrock. These weren't simple pits, they were multi-chambered systems with sluice gates and sedimentation tanks to filter silt, techniques still used in modern water treatment plants. During rare rains, every drop was captured. Channels diverted runoff from rooftops and streets into these stone-lined basins where it could be stored for years. The scale was staggering. One reservoir alone held over 250,000 gallons, enough to sustain thousands through brutal dry spells. What's truly revolutionary is how they balanced supply and demand. Cisterns near homes held small reserves for daily use, while larger tanks at the city's edge served agriculture, creating a tiered system that prevented waste. The genius of Harappan water management wasn't just in the engineering, it was in their adaptability. When the Gagahakra River began drying up around 1900 BC, they didn't collapse immediately. Instead, they dug deeper wells, expanded rainwater harvesting, and shifted crops to drought-resistant millets. Soil samples reveal they even practiced crop rotation to preserve soil moisture, a technique modern farmers are only now rediscovering. Their resilience hints at a profound ecological wisdom. They didn't conquer nature, they danced with it, adjusting their steps as the music changed. Today, as megacities like Chennai and Cape Town face Day Zero water crises, the Harappans' legacy feels unnervingly relevant. Their systems required no electricity, no fossil fuels, just meticulous observation and communal effort. Modern engineers studying their designs have identified passive cooling techniques in their storage tanks that kept water fresh without refrigeration, and gravity-fed distribution that eliminated pumping costs. The lesson isn't just about technology, it's about mindset. The Harappans saw water not as a commodity but as a sacred trust, a resource so precious it demanded collective stewardship. Perhaps their most haunting innovation was their attitude toward waste. Unlike Rome's famed aqueducts that dumped excess water into sewers, Harappan systems were closed loops. Bathwater drained into gardens, runoff nourished crops, and every used drop had a purpose. In an era of climate chaos, their ghostly reservoirs and silent wells whisper a challenge. Can we, with all our technology, learn to value water as they did? The answer will determine whether our cities become the next Mohenjo-Daro, not ruins of the past, but blueprints for the future. The storm god worshipped by the Hattians wasn't just a deity. He was a force of nature so powerful his roar echoed across millennia, shaping the mythologies of empires yet to rise. Known as Taru in the Hatchan tongue, this tempestuous figure straddled the line between destruction and renewal, his thunderbolts both terrifying and life-giving. Unlike the distant sky gods of other cultures, Taru was intimately tied to the Anatolian landscape, his moods reflecting the abrupt storms that swept across the high plateaus. When the Hittites absorbed Hatchan lands, they didn't erase Taru. They rebranded him as Tarhun, slotting him into their pantheon but preserving his core essence. The transformation was genius. By keeping the Hatchan gods' fundamental traits while grafting on Indo-European elements, they created a divine hybrid that felt both familiar and new to conquered peoples. This theological fusion left traces far beyond Hittite borders. The storm god's journey through myth becomes astonishing when you spot his fingerprints in unexpected places. Take Zeus, the Greek sky father. His lightning-wielding, bull-associated imagery mirrors Tarhun's iconography so closely it's hard to dismiss as coincidence. Even the Norse Thor, with his red beard and penchant for hurling thunder, shares striking parallels, but the most compelling link lies in the rituals. Hatchan texts describe ceremonies where priests would mimic the god's thunder by pounding colossal bronze drums, a practice that resurfaces in altered forms across the ancient world. The Greeks had their bronze kettle drums at Dodona, oracle site of Zeus, while Norse sagas speak of Thor's chariot rolling with a deafening roar, echoes of those Anatolian storms channeled through myth. What set the Hatchan storm cult apart was its raw physicality. Excavations at Alakahuruk uncovered ritual deposits of bull skulls adorned with gold sun discs offerings meant to harness the god's dual nature as both celestial and chthonic. The bulls weren't just symbols, they were living conduits for Taru's power, their sacrifice releasing his energy into the world. Later Hittite reliefs show Tarhun standing atop a bull, his weapon raised, but the posture is pure Hatchan, an artistic lineage stretching back to their earliest carvings. Even the god's signature weapon evolved without losing its essence. the Hatchin thunder mace became the Hittites' forked lightning bolt, which in turn inspired the Greek koronos. Perhaps the most intriguing twist comes from Hatchin weather magic. Cuneiform tablets describe rituals where priests would splash water on stones to summon rain, a sympathetic magic practice that migrated northward with Indo-European tribes. Centuries later, Slavic folk healers were still performing nearly identical rites to end droughts, a testament to how deeply Hatchin spirituality permeated Eurasia's cultural DNA. Their storm god's legacy wasn't just in stories, it was in the very way humans sought to negotiate with the skies. The Hattians' greatest triumph might be how their divine concepts outlasted political extinction. When archaeologists deciphered Hittite texts naming Tahun, father of gods, they initially assumed it was original theology. Now we recognize the phrasing as a direct loan from Hatchin hymns. Even the biblical Baal's battle with the sea monster Yam bears uncanny resemblance to a Hatchin myth fragment where Taru fights the serpent Ilianka. These aren't mere parallels, they're branches of a sacred tree rooted in Anatolia's red soil. The next time you hear thunder roll in the distance, listen closely. That primal awe you feel, the Hattians channeled it first, turning fear into worship, and worship into a legacy that would shake the heavens for ages to come. Those eerie Sanxingdui bronze trees with their outstretched branches and perching birds might be more than ritual objects. They could be celestial maps frozen in metal. Towering over 12 feet tall, each tier of branches aligns with numbers deeply significant in early Chinese astronomy. 9 levels mirroring the 9 layers of heaven in Shu cosmology. 12 fruits echoing the lunar cycles, and 4 cardinal direction birds representing the celestial guardians. Archaeologists recently noticed something extraordinary. When sunlight hits the bronze leaves at certain angles, the shadows form patterns matching star clusters described in ancient I Ching texts. These aren't just sculptures, they're 3-dimensional star charts, encoding astronomical knowledge passed down through oral traditions long before written records. The most compelling evidence comes from the infamous cosmic eye motifs adorning many Sanxingdui masks. These protruding, tubular eyes, once dismissed as artistic exaggeration, now appear to track specific celestial events. When modeled with astronomical software, their angles align with the summer solstice sunrise as viewed from the ruined central platform 2,000 years ago. Even more startling, the slight asymmetry of the pupils matches the positional shift of Venus between its appearances as morning and evening star. This level of precision suggests the masks weren't portraits but ritual instruments worn by priests during sky-watching ceremonies to become the celestial bodies they venerated. Deeper connections emerge when examining the jade discs found alongside these bronzes. Unlike the classic by discs of later Chinese dynasties, Sanxingdui versions feature 24 notches along their edges, a number matching the solar terms in the traditional agricultural calendar. Some bear intricate etchings that, when overlaid with star maps, recreate the night sky during the spring equinox around 1600 BCE. The discs' varying thicknesses even correlate to brightness magnitudes of reference stars, proving these artisans didn't just observe the heavens, they quantified them in jade and bronze. Perhaps the most astonishing revelation involves the infamous Wheel of Heaven artifact. Initially thought to be a decorative shield, advanced spectral analysis revealed traces of cinnabar in its grooves, a mineral sacred to early Chinese astronomy. When suspended and spun, the wheel's alternating gold and bronze segments create a strobe-like effect under torchlight, accurately simulating the retrograde motion of Mars against the fixed stars. This wasn't mere decoration, it was a teaching tool demonstrating planetary movements centuries before Ptolemy's epicycles. These artifacts collectively paint a picture of a civilization deeply attuned to cosmic rhythms, where astronomy governed everything from planting cycles to royal coronations. The Shu kings who ruled Sanxingdui likely derived their authority from perceived mastery of celestial patterns, using astronomical predictions to demonstrate divine favor. Their sudden disappearance around 1200 BC coincides with a period of extreme solar minimums and recorded climate upheaval, suggesting their sky-based legitimacy crumbled when the heavens themselves seemed to rebel. Yet fragments of their knowledge survived, resurfacing in the precise astral alignments of Zhou dynasty observatories and the celestial imagery of Chu shamanistic texts. The true legacy of Sanxingdui stargazers lies not in their accurate observations, but in their ambitious synthesis of cosmos and culture. They didn't just track stars, they wove them into the fabric of power, art, and identity, creating a worldview where humanity and heaven moved in sacred synchrony. Those silent bronze trees still hold their secrets, but each new discovery brings us closer to hearing their long-lost song of stars and earth. The Oxus civilization didn't just trade goods, they controlled the lifeblood of Bronze Age commerce, turning their desert cities into the ancient world's most exclusive marketplace. Picture this: a single pound of lapis lazuli, mined from the remote mountains of Afghanistan, could travel over 1,500 miles through Oxus hands before reaching an Egyptian pharaoh's workshop. The deep blue stone, prized for its resemblance to the night sky, became a status symbol from the Nile to the Indus, and the Oxus merchants held the keys to its supply. They didn't just move luxury items, they dictated their value, employing a standardized weight system so precise that archaeologists have found identical stone cubes from Mesopotamia to the Indus Valley, each bearing the Oxus seal. These weren't mere traders, they were the original arbiters of globalization. Tin, the unsung hero of the Bronze Age, was their other monopoly. Without it, copper alone was too soft for weapons or tools, and the Oxus controlled access to the richest tin deposits in Central Asia. Ships carrying Oxus tin have been traced as far as Mesopotamia, where kings relied on steady shipments to arm their armies. A single cuneiform tablet from Mari in modern Syria pleads for an urgent delivery. Send tin at all costs or the smiths will sit idle. The Oxus didn't just profit from this desperation, they engineered it. By stockpiling tin during political unrest and releasing it at premium prices, they mastered economic tactics we'd recognize today as market manipulation. Their true genius, however, lay in something far subtler: information. Oxus merchants didn't just transport goods, they transported ideas. A seal carved in Gona de Paix might depict a Mesopotamian god, while a Harappan-style bull appears on Oxus pottery, evidence of a cultural fluency that let them negotiate with everyone. They acted as translators in more than language, blending artistic motifs and religious symbols to put trading partners at ease. A lapis lazuli necklace bound for Sumer might be strung with beads in a pattern sacred to both cultures, a silent guarantee of trust. The decline of their trade network wasn't sudden but agonizingly slow. As climate shifts dried up the Amu Darya's tributaries, overland routes became perilous. New maritime traders like the Dilmun merchants of Bahrain began bypassing Oxus middlemen entirely, shipping tin and lapis directly via the Persian Gulf. Yet their legacy didn't vanish, it fractured. The weight standards they perfected resurfaced in Persian bazaars, and their bartering techniques lived on in Silk Road caravanserais. Even the word lajvad, Persian for lapis lazuli, may derive from an Oxus term, a linguistic fossil of their once unrivaled dominance. The Oxus prove an uncomfortable truth: civilizations don't need pyramids or epic battles to change the world. Sometimes all it takes is a merchant with a keen eye, a steady scale, and the cunning to know that controlling the supply of beauty and power is its own kind of empire. Genetic research on the Tarim mummies has upended long-held assumptions with the subtlety of an earthquake. When scientists first extracted DNA from those 4,000-year-old bones, they expected to find clear links to European or Near Eastern populations, proof of early westward migrations into China. Instead, the results delivered a stunning twist. The mummies carried genes pointing not to distant wanderers, but to a population that had been isolated in Central Asia for millennia. This wasn't a case of outsiders drifting east. It was evidence of an ancient people who had called the region home long before the expansion of Indo-European or East Asian groups. The implications ripple far beyond physical appearance. Their genetic makeup reveals a branch of humanity known as the ancient North Eurasians, a ghost population whose DNA lingers in modern Europeans and Native Americans but had never before been found so prominently preserved. This discovery shreds the old narrative that the Tarim Basin was merely a crossroads for transient cultures. Instead, it suggests these people were descendants of Ice Age survivors who clung to their refuge while glaciers retreated, developing their own distinct way of life while the world changed around them. Yet the real shock came when researchers compared their DNA to other ancient samples. While the mummies shared ancestry with hunter-gatherers from Siberia's Lake Baikal region, they showed no recent mixing with neighboring steppe populations or East Asian farmers. This genetic isolation flies in the face of everything we know about the Bronze Age, a period typically defined by mass migrations and cultural collisions. How did they remain so distinct while surrounded by dynamic civilizations? The answer might lie in their environment. The Tarim Basin, shielded by the Tian Shan and Kunlun Mountains, could have served as a biological island, a place where unique genetic and cultural traits were preserved like insects in amber. Even more fascinating are the cultural contradictions. Despite their genetic isolation, the mummies wore woven woolens with patterns resembling Celtic tartans, and their graves contained millet from China and wheat from the Near East. Their very existence forces us to rethink the relationship between genes and culture. They prove that ideas could travel faster than people, with trade networks spreading technologies and fashions across ethnic boundaries long before mass migrations blurred them. A single mummy's DNA might lack Iranian ancestry, but the bronze tools buried with her tell a different story, one of bartered knowledge crossing mountains and deserts. The latest studies add another layer of complexity. Some mummies show traces of plague bacteria in their teeth, hinting at contact with steppe populations just before their civilization faded. Others reveal adaptations to high altitudes, suggesting generations spent navigating the thin air of the Pamirs. These details paint a portrait not of a static relic population, but of a resilient culture that selectively engaged with the outside world on its own terms. What makes the Tarim mummies so revolutionary is their refusal to fit neatly into boxes. They challenge our instinct to categorize ancient peoples as either migrants or natives, revealing instead a mosaic of human experience where biology, culture, and environment interact in unpredictable ways. Those flaxen-haired figures lying beneath the Taklamakan sands weren't lost Europeans or wayward Siberians. They were something entirely their own, a reminder that history's richest stories often unfold in the gaps between our tidy theories. The first time you see an Olmec colossal head, it's impossible not to wonder who were these people. Towering at over 9 feet tall and weighing up to 40 tons, the stone faces with broad noses and full lips seem to gaze across the centuries with an almost unsettling presence. But what if these iconic sculptures weren't purely Olmec creations at all? Emerging evidence suggests an even older, shadowy culture might have laid the groundwork for one of Mesoamerica's most enduring mysteries. Recent excavations at sites like Zazakatla and El Manotti have uncovered artifacts predating the classic Olmec period by centuries, objects bearing the same distinctive artistic style, but without the later civilization's political flourishes. The most provocative finds, miniature stone heads no larger than a fist, carved with identical broad features and headgear resembling the later colossi. These weren't prototypes, they were part of a tradition already in full swing, hinting at a pre-Olmec society with advanced stoneworking skills and a shared cultural lexicon. The plot thickens when examining the raw materials. The basalt used for the colossal heads came from the Tuxtla Mountains, quarried over 50 miles from their final resting places. Transporting these multi-ton blocks without wheels or pack animals would have required not just manpower but sophisticated social organization. Yet isotopic analysis of pre-Olmec tools reveals something unexpected. The same quarries were being exploited as early as 1500 BC, long before the Olmec Golden Age. Whoever these people were, they'd already mastered the logistical nightmare of moving mountains. Now comes the most controversial twist: the features themselves. The striking physiognomy of the heads has fueled theories ranging from indigenous stylistic exaggeration to transoceanic contact. Skeletons from pre-Olmec burial sites show cranial modification practices that could explain some sculpted traits, but other elements, like the carefully detailed ear spools and headdresses, mirror adornments from West African and Pacific Island cultures. A handful of terracotta figurines from this era even depict braided hairstyles eerily similar to traditions from the Niger Delta. Mainstream archaeology remains skeptical of direct contact, but the cultural parallels are hard to ignore. The same period saw the rise of advanced seafaring in both West Africa and Polynesia, with evidence of sweet potatoes, a new world crop reaching the Pacific Islands centuries before Columbus. Could accidental drift voyages have brought fleeting encounters, or might these similarities reflect something deeper? A shared human fascination with representing power through exaggerated features emerging independently across the globe. The truth may lie in a forgotten middle ground. Linguistic analysis of early Olmec script reveals loanwords possibly borrowed from a substrate language, one that doesn't fit any known Mesoamerican family. Combined with genetic studies showing unusual haplogroup diversity among pre-Olmec remains, a picture emerges of a cosmopolitan melting pot where ideas from distant shores could have blended with local traditions. What's undeniable is the legacy these precursors left. Their stoneworking techniques became the foundation for later Maya stelae. Their iconography seeped into Zapotec and Teotihuacan art. And those colossal heads, they may have begun as portraits of revered elders in a society we've yet to name, only to be co-opted by the Olmecs as symbols of their own legitimacy. Like so many lost civilizations, their greatest achievement wasn't surviving in memory, it was shaping the world that came after them, invisibly and indelibly, one stone face at a time. Deep in the arid valleys of southeastern Iran, a chance discovery in the early 2000s sparked one of archaeology's most heated debates. Did an entire Bronze Age civilization, as sophisticated as Mesopotamia but utterly unknown to history, once flourish here? The Youve culture, named after the modern city near its ruins, emerged from obscurity when flash floods along the Halul River exposed thousands of carved chlorite vessels buried for millennia. These weren't crude potsherds but intricate works of art, bowls and boxes adorned with serpents, scorpions, and mythic beasts, their craftsmanship rivaling anything from Sumer or Elam. Local farmers, recognizing their value, began selling them on the black market, inadvertently triggering a scramble that would divide scholars worldwide. What makes these artifacts so controversial isn't just their beauty, it's their iconography. Many depict scenes straight from Mesopotamian myths, like the hero Gilgamesh battling monsters, yet with stylistic twists suggesting independent storytelling. A legendary creature might wear horns reminiscent of Indus Valley deities, or a goddess hold plants unknown in Babylonian art. Even more provocative are the inscriptions, crude yet recognizable cuneiform-like markings that some linguists argue represent a previously unknown writing system. The implications are staggering. If verified, Youve could rewrite the narrative of early Near Eastern civilizations, revealing a culture that wasn't just borrowing from Mesopotamia but exchanging ideas with it as equals. Skeptics, however, see red flags. The initial discoveries were marred by looting, leaving key sites stripped of context. Without stratified excavation layers, dating relies largely on stylistic comparisons, a method critics call unreliable. Some scholars allege forgeries, pointing to anachronistic tool marks visible under microscopes. Even the proposed Youve script faces scrutiny. Most examples are brief and repetitive, with skeptics suggesting they're decorative motifs rather than true writing. The most damning criticism: many artifacts surfaced not in controlled digs but from dealers' backrooms, their origins as murky as the myths they depict. Yet excavations led by Iranian archaeologist Youve Majidzadeh since 2002 offer compelling counterpoints. At Konar Sandal, a massive stepped platform, possibly a ziggurat, was uncovered, its mud bricks stamped with seals matching those on looted artifacts. Radiocarbon dates from the site's lowest layers cluster around 2500 BC, contemporaneous with Ur's royal tombs. Even more telling are the workshops found nearby, furnaces for smelting copper and arsenical bronze, and piles of raw chlorite ready for carving. This wasn't a peripheral outpost, it was an industrial hub capable of producing the very objects skeptics dismissed as too refined for a provincial culture. The geopolitical stakes add another layer of tension. For Iran, Youve represents a chance to reclaim pre-Islamic heritage from the shadow of Mesopotamia and Egypt. Nationalist narratives frame it as Arata, a legendary wealthy kingdom mentioned in Sumerian texts. Western academia, meanwhile, hesitates to rewrite textbooks based on evidence still emerging from a region long closed to international teams. The truth likely lies in between. Chemical sourcing proves the chlorite came from local quarries, and stylistic analysis reveals motifs distinct enough to rule out mere imitation. Whether Youve was a peer of Sumer or a brilliant tributary culture, its artifacts reflect a sophistication that demands we broaden our map of the ancient Near East. What's undeniable is the cultural ripple effect. Similar chlorite vessels have turned up in Mesopotamian temples and Indus Valley cities, proving Youve was wired into Bronze Age trade networks. One theory suggests they controlled the flow of lapis lazuli from Afghanistan to the west, amassing wealth that financed their artistic revolution. Their decline around 2000 BC mirrors other collapses of the era, likely triggered by climate shifts that desiccated the Halul Basin. But their legacy endured. Elements of their serpent iconography reappear in later Elamite art, and their stepped platform architecture may have influenced Persian fire temples. The Youve controversy encapsulates archaeology's greatest challenge: how to reconstruct history when the evidence is scattered, politicized, or still buried. For every sealed workshop confirming their craftsmanship, there's a looted tomb muddying the timeline. Yet those exquisite chlorite carvings, with their hybrid creatures and untranslated symbols, whisper of a people who refuse to be mere footnotes. Whether kingdom or cultural crossroads, Youve demands we question not just what we know about the past, but who gets to decide what counts as civilization in the first place. High in the mist-shrouded peaks of Colombia's Sierra Nevada to Santa Marta, the Terrona built a civilization designed to vanish. While the Aztec and Inca empires fell to Spanish steel and disease, these master goldsmiths and engineers chose a different fate, retreating deeper into the mountains, abandoning their coastal cities to create a hidden world so remote that many of their stone terraces and pathways weren't rediscovered until the 20th century. Their story isn't just one of resistance, it's a blueprint for survival crafted in gold and stone. The Terrona's urban planning bordered on prophetic. Their cities, like the famous Ciudad Perdida, weren't just built on mountains, they were engineered into them. Terraced platforms stabilized hillsides, preventing erosion while creating flat spaces for homes and agriculture. But the real genius lay beneath the surface. A network of stone-lined canals and drains channeled rainwater efficiently, preventing floods during tropical storms while storing water for dry seasons. Their roads, graded with precise inclines and paved with smooth stones, connected settlements across treacherous terrain, wide enough for ceremonial processions but deliberately too narrow for Spanish horses. Every element served dual purposes: beauty and defense, spirituality and sustainability. their craftsmanship elevated gold beyond ornamentation into the realm of sacred technology. Terracotta smiths pioneered metallurgical techniques so advanced that modern engineers still debate their methods. Using a process called lost wax casting, they created pendants depicting bat gods and jaguar men with hollow, lightweight interiors, achieving intricate detail without wasteful material. But these weren't mere decorations. Many pieces, like the famous Paporos lime containers, were ritual objects used in coca ceremonies, their designs encoding cosmological beliefs. The Spanish melted down countless treasures, yet enough survived to reveal a startling truth. The Terracotta valued gold not for its wealth, but as a physical manifestation of sunlight, a metal literally woven into their spiritual relationship with nature. When conquest became inevitable, the Terracotta executed a strategic vanishing act. Oral histories tell of guided retreats, whole communities dismantling their coastal settlements under cover of night, carrying sacred objects into the highlands where Spanish armor and cavalry were useless. Their descendants, the Kogi people, still inhabit these mountains today, preserving traditions in self-imposed isolation. Archaeologists working with Kogi guides have uncovered over 250 stone villages, many accessible only by days of hiking through jungle. These aren't ruins in the traditional sense, they're frozen moments of a civilization that chose obscurity over extinction. The greatest testament to their foresight lies in what they left behind and what they took with them. Abandoned coastal sites show deliberate sabotage, gold workshops buried, roads blocked with rubble. But hidden in the highlands, researchers found something extraordinary: terraces producing coca, beans, and maize using polyculture techniques that prevent soil depletion, methods now championed by modern permaculturists. The Terracotta didn't just flee, they transplanted their entire ecological wisdom to a sanctuary where it could endure. Modern satellite imagery suggests less than 40% of their settlements have been documented. Each new discovery, like the recently uncovered green roads lined with fruit-bearing trees, reveals a people who saw survival not as defiance but as harmony. The Spanish wrote them off as primitive holdouts. In truth, the Terracotta were visionaries, proving that sometimes the deepest resistance isn't standing your ground, it's knowing when to disappear and how to ensure your legacy outlasts the empires that sought to erase it. While the Three Kingdoms period often dominates Korea's ancient history, the Silla dynasty carved its own path with a blend of spiritual artistry and rigid social control that still baffles historians today. Nestled in the southeastern peninsula, this civilization didn't just adopt Buddhism, they reimagined it, crafting gold-crowned statues and pagodas so radiant they seemed to channel divinity itself. But beneath the gilded surface lay a society governed by the golpum, or bone rank system, a hereditary hierarchy so strict it determined everything from marriage partners to the size of one's burial mound. This wasn't just social stratification, it was a cosmic order etched into the very bones of its people. Take the famed gold crowns of Silla, unearthed from lavish royal tombs like those at Jeonju. These aren't mere ornaments, they're metaphysical blueprints. Delicate strands of gold curve like tree branches, dangling jade ornaments that shimmer like dewdrops, a direct nod to the sacred world trees of Siberian shamanism. Yet nestled among these pagan symbols sit tiny Buddhist stupas, proving Silla's genius for syncretism. The message was clear: even as Buddhism arrived from China, Silla's rulers claimed divine authority by weaving old and new beliefs into something uniquely their own. But here's the twist: only those of sacred bone rank, the highest caste, could wear these crowns. Your birthright didn't just dictate your wealth, it determined your access to the divine. The golpum system's precision was chilling. 6 tiers of nobility were distinguished by the literal quality of one's ancestry, with true bone aristocrats at the top, a reference to the purity of their lineage, believed to descend from celestial beings. Marrying outside your rank wasn't just taboo, it rendered children inheriting the lower rank a genetic demotion enforced with brutal consistency. even in death the hierarchy held. Tomb excavations reveal true bone elites buried with gold daggers and glassware from Persia, while lower ranks made do with humble pottery. Yet for all its rigidity, the system birthed paradoxical innovations. Forbidden from military roles, lower-ranked nobles poured their energy into commerce and arts, fueling Scylla's reputation as the cultural heart of Korea. Nowhere is this duality clearer than in the Sokyoram Grotto, a masterpiece of Buddhist engineering hidden deep within Mount Toham. Here, a serene stone Buddha sits encircled by celestial guardians, his smile illuminated by dawn light channeled through a precisely angled entrance. The artisans, likely mid-ranking nobles barred from politics but granted patronage to pursue perfection in stone. The grotto's acoustics amplify chanting into an ethereal chorus, while hidden drainage channels prevent erosion, an architectural marvel that mirrors Scylla's own balancing act between earthly order and spiritual transcendence. The system's collapse holds its own mysteries. By the 9th century, the Golpum's inflexibility bred resentment. Younger sons of noble families, denied status despite their bloodline, turned to rebellion. Buddhist monasteries, once aligned with the elite, began preaching equality, undermining the divine justification for caste. Yet even in decline, Scylla's legacy endured. The bone rank concept seeped into Korean Confucianism, influencing later dynasties' emphasis on lineage, while their fusion of Buddhist and indigenous art became a national aesthetic. What makes Scylla truly fascinating isn't just their gold or their rigid rank, it's how they turned social stratification into an engine for cultural brilliance. Their story forces us to ask, can oppression and artistic flourishing coexist? The answer, etched in gold and bone, is as complex as humanity itself. The Wari Empire didn't just build roads, they wove the Andes together with a network of highways so advanced they put Europe's medieval trails to shame. Centuries before the Inca became South America's most famous engineers, the Wari carved pathways through some of the world's most unforgiving terrain, connecting mountain peaks to coastal valleys with a sophistication that still baffles modern surveyors. These weren't simple dirt paths, they were feats of civil engineering. Graded slopes to prevent erosion, staircases cut into sheer cliffs, and drainage systems that kept the stone-paved surfaces intact through torrential rains. A single highway could stretch over 1,000 miles, linking administrative centers, temples, and military outposts into the first true imperial web in the Andes. What set the Wari apart wasn't just their ambition, it was their understanding that roads were more than infrastructure. They were tools of control and cultural exchange. Along these ribbons of stone, runners called chasquis relayed messages using knotted cords, a precursor to the Inca quipu system. Traders carried spondylus shells from Ecuador's warm waters to the highlands, where they were prized as sacred objects, while crops like maize and quinoa moved in the opposite direction. The roads also served as pilgrimage routes, funneling worshippers to ceremonial sites like Wari Wilka, where evidence of mass gatherings suggests festivals drawing thousands from across the empire. This wasn't just transportation, it was the circulatory system of a civilization. Their agricultural innovations were equally groundbreaking. While the Nazca etched geoglyphs into deserts and the Moch built adobe temples, the Wari transformed entire mountainsides into sprawling terraced farms. These weren't the simple step farms seen elsewhere, they were hydrological masterpieces. Using precisely angled retaining walls and subterranean canals, they captured scarce rainwater, redirected natural springs, and even created microclimates where different crops could thrive at varying elevations. Excavations at Cerro Ball, a Wari stronghold perched atop a mesa, revealed terraces that produced potatoes at the base, maize midway up, and coca leaves near the summit, each layer meticulously engineered to exploit temperature variations of just a few degrees. The secret to their success, a bureaucratic system that balanced central authority with local flexibility. Unlike later empires that imposed rigid uniformity, the Weri adapted their governance to regional needs. Conquered coastal communities might keep their leaders but pay tribute in cotton, while highland groups provided labor for road maintenance. Administrative centers like Pikalacta, with its hundreds of identical courtyard complexes, suggest a standardized approach to record keeping and resource distribution. Yet artifacts found at these sites, coastal shells in mountain warehouses, highland pottery in desert outposts, prove this wasn't just top-down rule. It was a reciprocal system where goods and ideas flowed freely. Their decline is as enigmatic as their rise. Around 80% of Weri sites show signs of deliberate abandonment, not destruction around 800 CE. Doorways were sealed with stones, ceremonial items carefully buried, as if the people expected to return. Climate data reveals a prolonged drought, but that doesn't fully explain their orderly retreat. Some scholars believe internal strife fragmented the empire, while others point to a deliberate decentralization with communities dispersing to survive. The Inca, arriving centuries later, would adopt and expand Weri roads and terraces, but the architects themselves had already faded into the land they shaped. Today, their legacy survives in unexpected ways. Modern Peruvian farmers still use repaired Weri terraces, and stretches of their highways serve as hiking trails. The most profound lesson, however, lies in their understanding of connection, not just between places but between people and the land. The Weri didn't conquer nature, they conversed with it, turning the Andes challenges into the very foundation of their greatness. Their silent stones whisper a truth we're only now relearning. The most enduring empires aren't those that dominate, but those that adapt. Long before Angkor Wat spires pierced the Cambodian skyline, a network of kingdoms thrived in the region's floodplains, societies so advanced they turned monsoon rains into an empire's lifeblood. The Funan civilization, flourishing from the 1st to 6th centuries along the Mekong Delta, didn't just adapt to water, they worshipped it. Their cities pulsed with a hydraulic ingenuity that would later inspire the Khmer's vast reservoirs. Picture this, a metropolis crisscrossed by canals so precisely engineered that tidal flows flushed them clean twice daily, while elevated dwellings on stilts rose above seasonal floods like a permanent Venice of the tropics. Chinese envoys wrote of Funan's floating markets, where traders poled boats laden with pepper and ivory between houses, their goods exchanged for Roman glass and Persian silverware that still surface in excavations today. Funan's true power lay in its role as Southeast Asia's first great maritime hub. Situated at the crossroads of the Cinnamon Route linking India to China, their ports bristled with sails from distant lands. A single archaeological dig at Ok-Io, their premier trading city, unearthed gold coins bearing the likeness of Antoninus Pius, Iranian turquoise, and Tamil language inscriptions. But their most enduring legacy wasn't the goods they moved, it was the ideas. Funan's elite adopted Sanskrit as a court language, blended Hindu deities with local water spirits, and developed a unique artistic style where Indian iconography met indigenous craftsmanship. Their sculptures of the goddess Durga, for example, depict her not atop a lion as in Indian tradition, but standing on a crocodile, a nod to local riverine predators. When Funan faded in the 6th century, its successor Chenla took Cambodia's cultural evolution inland. Where Funan had mastered water, Chenla harnessed earth. Their engineers carved massive rice terraces into hillsides, creating surplus harvests that funded monumental construction. At Samba Pre Kuk, their architectural experiments previewed Angkor's future grandeur. Brick temples topped with carved lintels showing the god Indra riding his three-headed elephant, their surfaces dancing with light as the tropical sun filtered through perforated stone screens. Chenla's rulers took divine kingship to new heights, erecting stone stelae that blended genealogy with mythology, tracing royal bloodlines back to the union of a Brahmin priest and a celestial nymph. What truly set these precursor civilizations apart was their social fluidity. Unlike the rigid hierarchies of medieval Europe, Funan and Chenla's power structures absorbed foreign influences like sponges. A Chinese chronicle describes a Funan monarch who started life as a Brahmin's enslaved servant, while Chenla's queen Youve, one of Southeast Asia's first recorded female rulers, issued land grants in her own name. This adaptability laid the cultural DNA the Khmer would later amplify, a willingness to merge Hindu cosmology with indigenous animism or blend Chinese irrigation techniques with local materials. The transition to the Angkorian period wasn't a clean break but a slow metamorphosis. Early Khmer kings like Jayavarman Roman II didn't conquer Chenla so much as inherit its spiritual playbook, conducting rituals on sacred mountains to declare independence from Javanese overlords. The iconic Temple Mountain design of Angkor Wat, its earliest blueprints appear in Chenla's stepped pyramids where priests climbed symbolic summits to commune with gods. Even the Khmer's famed tonal sap fisheries owe their origins to Funan's aquaculture innovations. Modern archaeology is revealing just how much Angkor's brilliance owed to these forgotten forebears. LiDAR surveys have uncovered vast urban grids beneath Cambodia's soil, proof that Funan and Chenla's cities rivaled their successor in scale. Their story forces us to rethink how civilizations grow, not through sudden genius but through layers of accumulated knowledge like silt enriching the Mekong's banks. When you stand before Angkor Wat's bas-reliefs, you're not just seeing Khmer artistry, you're witnessing 1,000 years of cultural alchemy, where every chiseled stroke honored the kingdoms that came before. From the earthquake-defying cities of the Norte Chico to the maritime empire of the Minoans, each of these 30 lost civilizations represents a fragment of humanity's grand mosaic, a piece of the puzzle we're still assembling. The Nox haunting terracotta faces, the Oxus civilization's glittering trade networks, the Weri's mountain-carving highways, they all whisper truths about who we were long before history books began keeping score. Some vanished in fire and conquest, others faded like footprints in the rain, but each left behind clues that challenge our assumptions about progress, power, and what it means to truly endure. Consider the paradoxes they present. The Harappans built sewage systems finer than Victorian London's, yet left no evidence of kings or conquests. The Sangsingdui crafted bronze trees mapping the heavens, then buried them without explanation. The Tarona didn't just resist colonization, they perfected the art of disappearance, leaving cities designed to dissolve back into the jungle. Their stories remind us that collapse isn't always failure. Sometimes it's transformation, sometimes it's a choice. What binds them all is the urgency of their lessons. The Zapotec's ballgame courts teach us that ritual can be as vital as irrigation. The Dilmun merchants proved commerce could weave cultures together long before globalization. And the Vinca symbols, whether proto-writing or holy code, dare us to reconsider where and how human creativity first sparked. These weren't failed experiments, they were alternate paths, roads not taken in the march toward modernity. So why do they haunt us? Because in their silences lie warnings and possibilities. The Elamites show how conquerors absorb the conquered. The Tarim mummies dismantle myths of pure cultures. The Juroft controversy exposes how easily history gets hijacked by politics. Their greatest gift isn't just the artifacts they left behind, it's the humility they demand. For every Angkor Wat that dominates textbooks, there's a Funan civilization that laid its foundations. Now we pass the question to you. Which of these lost voices spoke loudest? Was it the Hattians, whose gods outlasted their name, the Olmec's enigmatic ancestors hiding in plain sight? Or perhaps the Silla dynasty, who turned rigid hierarchy into golden artistry? The comment section awaits your epiphanies, and remember, this isn't the end of the story. Every year, archaeologists peel back another layer of dirt or decode another symbol, proving history's pages are still being written. Stay curious, keep questioning, and who knows? The next lost civilization uncovered might just be yours.